Asha Degree, known simply as Asha to those who loved her, was the kind of child people remembered. Gentle, thoughtful, a little shy but deeply caring. The type of girl who found joy in simple things, family dinners, school routines, and the rhythm of a basketball bouncing against pavement. Her world was small, safe, and structured. And then, without warning, she vanished. But before we go any further, pause for a second. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel and who they reach. Because tonight's story, this mystery, has traveled decades without answers. A disappearance that happened in the early morning hours of Valentine's Day, 2000, in the quiet town of Shelby, North Carolina, leaving behind a trail so confusing, so fragmented that even today it refuses to come together. What you're about to see isn't just a retelling. It's a reconstruction, built from evidence, witness accounts, and the unsettling gaps in between. This is an examination of the disappearance of Asha Degree and the haunting trail that leads toward the woods along Highway 18. February 14th, 1988. A day meant for love. Harold and Aquila Degree stood side by side, exchanging vows, stepping into a future they believed would be filled with stability, growth, and family. 2 years later, that future began to take shape. On August 5, 1990, they welcomed their daughter, Asha. Not long after, their son O'Brien completed the picture. A family of 4. Rooted firmly in Shelby, North Carolina, a quiet, rural town west of Charlotte where neighbors knew each other, and life moved at a slower, predictable pace. The Degrees built their life there. Simple, structured, close-knit. Both parents worked steady daytime jobs, which meant Asha and her brother learned independence early. They were what many would call latchkey kids, coming home from school, letting themselves in, and waiting for their parents to return. But this wasn't neglect. This was trust. Trust built on routine. Trust built on behavior. Because Asha was not the type of child to wander. From a very young age, she understood boundaries. She was cautious, especially around strangers, and naturally reserved in unfamiliar situations. By the time she reached elementary school, her parents already knew what to expect. When they came home from work, Asha would be there. Homework done. Chores handled. Safe. Predictable. But there was another side to her. At school, Asha came alive. She wasn't loud, but she was focused, driven, competitive in the most innocent way. She joined the local youth basketball league and quickly found her rhythm. As a point guard, she wasn't just playing, she was leading. Encouraging teammates. Setting the pace. Lifting others when they struggled. It wasn't about winning, it was about effort, about connection. And yet just 2 days before everything changed, something small but telling happened. Her team lost. For the first time all season. Asha had fouled out of the game. And for a moment, that loss hit hard. She cried. Her teammates cried. Not out of anger, but out of disappointment, passion. But just as quickly as the emotions came, they faded. Asha bounced back. She supported her brother at his game later that day. Smiling again. Present again. That moment, simple as it seems, would later stand out. Because it showed exactly who Asha was. Resilient. Compassionate. Grounded. At home, life remained tightly controlled. The late 1990s brought with it a growing concern among parents, the internet. Stories filled the news. Strangers reaching children through screens. Manipulation, danger, fear. Harold and Aquila made a decision. No computer in the house. No unnecessary exposure. Instead, they built their children's lives around what they trusted: family, church, and school. and Asha didn't resist it. In fact, it suited her perfectly. She was naturally cautious, naturally quiet. She didn't crave the outside world. She was content within the boundaries her parents had set, which makes what happened next almost impossible to understand, because everything about Asha pointed in one direction. She wouldn't leave. Not alone. Not at night. Not into the unknown. She was even afraid of dogs, so much so that stepping outside alone wasn't something she enjoyed. And yet, on Valentine's Day, 2000, she was gone. The timeline begins just days earlier. Friday, February 11th, 2000. No school. Asha and O'Brien spend the day like any kids would, visiting their aunt's house down the street, laughing, passing time. Later, they head to basketball practice. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. Saturday, February 12th. Game day. The loss happens. Emotions run high, but settle quickly. That night, Asha attends a sleepover at her cousin's house. They stay up late, watching TV, talking, being kids. Sunday, February 13th. Her parents pick her up. The family attends church together, routine, familiar, grounding. Afterward, they visit another relative. Asha receives small gifts, cologne, candy. Normal moments, the kind that fade into memory. By evening, exhaustion catches up to her. She goes to bed early, around 6:30 p.m. But the night doesn't stay quiet. A storm rolls in. Heavy winds. Thunder cracking through the sky. Asha wakes up. Walks into the living room. Sits with her parents. Watching television as the storm rages outside. Then another disruption. Around 9 p.m., a nearby car accident knocks out the power. Darkness. Silence. Uncertainty. Her mother decides to wait until morning for baths. Sends the kids back to bed. At 11 p.m., Harold leaves the house briefly. A last-minute trip to buy anniversary gifts. Because despite everything, Valentine's Day still matters. Still something worth celebrating. He returns. Time passes. Midnight comes. The power is restored around 12:30 a.m. Aquila wakes Harold, who had fallen asleep on the couch, and asks him to take care of the kerosene lamp. He stays up, watches TV, eventually checks on the kids. At 2:30 a.m., both Asha and her brother are asleep. Everything exactly as it should be. But sometime after that, something changes. O'Brien wakes briefly. He hears movement. Asha shifting in bed. At one point, he hears her get up, walk toward the bathroom. A small, ordinary moment. The kind no one would think twice about. But what he doesn't know, what no one knows, is whether she ever came back. Because sometime between that moment and 4 a.m., Asha quietly gets up, takes her backpack already packed, filled with clothes, candy, personal items, and without waking anyone, without leaving a note, without a sound, she walks out of the house, into the darkness, into the storm-soaked early morning. Alone. At 5:45 a.m., her mother wakes up. Another normal morning. Get the kids ready for school. Start the day. But when she checks the bedroom, something is wrong. O'Brien is there, still asleep. But Asha's bed is empty. At first, it doesn't make sense. Maybe she's in another room. Maybe she woke up early. But room by room, the reality sets in. She's not in the house. Not anywhere. Then they notice something else. Her house keys are missing. Now panic begins to rise. They call her grandmother, who lives just across the street. No sign of her there. No one has seen her. No one has heard anything. And suddenly, the quiet street of Shelby turns into a scene of desperation. Harold and Aquila run outside, calling her name, again and again, up and down the road, hopping, praying that she'll answer. But she doesn't. And after nearly an hour of searching, with no trace, no clues, no explanation, they make the call. 6:39 a.m. Police are notified. And within minutes, a mystery begins. When authorities arrived at the Degree residence just minutes after the call was placed, there was no hesitation, only urgency. This wasn't treated as a runaway. This wasn't brushed off as a child who wandered too far from home. From the very beginning, something felt wrong. Deputies began canvassing the immediate area, moving door to door, scanning yards, checking sheds, speaking to neighbors who had just begun their mornings, most still unaware that something unthinkable had already happened on their street. But within that first sweep, nothing. No footprints. No signs of struggle. No indication that anyone had forced their way in or out of the home. Inside, investigators conducted a careful inspection. Again, nothing. No broken locks. No disturbed furniture. No evidence of a confrontation. Which led to a chilling conclusion. Asha had left on her own. But that only deepened the mystery. Because if she chose to leave, where was she going? And why? By early afternoon, the situation escalated. Additional units were called in. Search dogs, rescue teams, detectives. Even the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation joined the effort. The house was sealed off, taped, processed as a potential crime scene. Investigators began reconstructing what Asha may have taken with her. With her mother's help, they built a list. A red vest, blue jeans with a red stripe, multiple shirts, black overalls with a Tweety bird design, a small black purse also featuring Tweety bird, candy, and most importantly, her backpack, the same backpack she had carried out into the night. Packed, prepared, as if she had somewhere to go. Then later that same day, the first real lead surfaced. 2 independent witnesses came forward. 2 men who had been driving along Highway 18 in the early hours of the morning, both describing something deeply unsettling. The first was a truck driver. He reported seeing a young girl walking alone along the roadside at approximately 3:30 a.m. It was raining, dark, visibility was low. But what stood out to him wasn't just the figure. It was the situation. A child alone on a highway at that hour. He didn't stop, but the image stayed with him. And when news of Asha's disappearance broke later that day, he knew what he had seen mattered. His sighting placed her just over a mile south of her home. The second witness added even more weight to the timeline. A former sheriff's deputy traveling with his son reported seeing someone around 4:15 a.m. At first, he believed it was an adult woman. But something about the figure felt off. Too small. Too slight. As he got closer, he began to realize. This wasn't an adult. This was a child. Walking alone. On the same stretch of Highway 18. Near its intersection with Highway 180. Again, about a mile from Asha's home. But this encounter didn't end the same way. Concerned, the man turned his vehicle around. He attempted to approach. to check if the person needed help. But the moment he came back into view, the figure reacted. Quickly, unexpectedly, they ran straight off the road and disappeared into the woods. That moment, that decision, would become one of the most haunting turning points in the entire case. Because if that was Asha, then she wasn't just walking. She was avoiding people, avoiding help, running from it. Based on these sightings, investigators shifted their focus. A search radius was established, spanning miles along Highway 18 and into the surrounding wooded areas. Search dogs were deployed. Volunteers joined in. Law enforcement combed through muddy terrain, thick brush, and open land. But the conditions were working against them. Heavy rain had soaked the ground, washed away scent trails, obliterated footprints. Anything that could have pointed them in the right direction was gone. And by nightfall on Valentine's Day, they had nothing. But the following day, something changed. A discovery, small but significant, emerged from a place no one expected. A volunteer search team approached a couple living near the highway. Their property sat roughly a mile south of the Degree home, close to where the sightings had been reported. The couple agreed to let searchers look around. In their backyard stood a small, open structure, used for storage. Old furniture, unused items, the kind of place no one pays attention to. Until they do. Inside, investigators found objects scattered across the floor. Candy wrappers, a green marker, a pencil from the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, and a photograph, a small photograph of a young girl. At first glance, it looked like Asha, but something didn't sit right. Still, these items were collected, logged as evidence, because there was a strong possibility they had come from Asha's backpack. The next day, more items were recovered from the same area. More candy wrappers. And when investigators spoke to families connected to Asha's basketball team, they confirmed something crucial. The candy matched what had been handed out at her game just days earlier. Which meant, at some point after leaving her house, Asha had been there, inside that structure, in that space. But the photograph, it remained a mystery. No one recognized the girl. Not her family, not her friends, not her classmates. Eventually, investigators concluded the photo was not of Asha, but it was still connected somehow. A piece of a puzzle that refused to take shape. And then, just like that, the trail ended again. Search efforts continued for days, expanding, intensifying, but with each passing hour, hope became harder to hold onto. By February 20th, less than a week after she vanished, the official large-scale search was called off. Not because they stopped caring, but because they had run out of ground to cover. Now, before we go further, if you've made it this far into the story, take a second, hit the like button, and subscribe, because cases like this deserve attention. They deserve eyes. And sometimes, the right person seeing the right detail can change everything. Weeks passed, then months, then something unexpected happened. On March 22nd, two developments surfaced. The first, a billboard, placed near the exact location where the second witness saw the figure run into the woods. A reminder, a signal, a plea to the public. Someone knows something. The second development happened behind closed doors. Investigators began questioning a wide range of individuals. family acquaintances, people in the community, even known offenders in the area. During this process, they constructed a psychological profile of a possible suspect. But that profile was never released, held back, protected, as if revealing it might compromise something bigger. Then, over a year later, the case took another turn. August 2, 2001. A contractor named Terry Fleming was working on a property, clearing land, cutting into the soil with heavy equipment, when suddenly his machine struck something. Not rock, not debris, something different. Wrapped, buried. He uncovered it, pulled it free. Black plastic, layers of it, carefully sealed. Inside, a backpack. At first it didn't mean much, but something felt off. So he noted the details, the name, the address. And the next morning, when his wife saw it, everything changed. Because the name belonged to Asha Degree, police were called immediately. They arrived on the scene, recovered the bag, and confirmed what no one wanted to hear. It had been buried deliberately, wrapped in multiple trash bags, hidden, protected from the elements, placed there long before it was discovered. Inside the backpack were personal items, clothing, school supplies, objects that pointed directly back to Asha. Investigators would later state they were 95% certain the contents belonged to her, which raised a terrifying question. If the backpack was here, then where was Asha? A new search began, focused on the area surrounding the discovery. But once again, conditions made it nearly impossible. Rough terrain, unforgiving weather, days of digging led to almost nothing. A few unrelated items, animal remains, a pair of men's khaki pants, but nothing that definitively connected back to her. Another search followed months later, covering miles of land along Highway 18, trying to reconstruct a path from her home to the place where the backpack was buried, a stretch that would eventually span over 20 miles. And still, no answers. The deeper investigators looked, the more the case seemed to resist resolution. Like every clue led somewhere, but nowhere at the same time. As the years passed, the case of Asha Degree didn't just grow cold. It grew complicated. Because with every passing lead, every new piece of evidence, came more questions than answers. And slowly, the investigation shifted. From what happened to what could have happened. One of the earliest and most debated theories was the simplest on the surface. That Asha left on her own. A runaway. At first glance, it almost made sense. The packed backpack, the extra clothing, the candy. It felt intentional, prepared, like a child setting out on a journey, her own version of an adventure. But the deeper you look, the harder that theory becomes to accept, because nothing in Asha's life pointed in that direction. She wasn't rebellious. She wasn't troubled. She wasn't trying to escape anything. Her world, while structured, was stable, loving, safe. There were no reports of bullying, no signs of distress, no hidden conflicts, no secret behaviors. So if she did leave on her own, why? What could possibly compel a 9-year-old girl, afraid of the dark, afraid of dogs, to step outside alone in the middle of a storm-filled night? Some believed it was imagination, a child's mind creating a purpose that didn't fully make sense to adults. Maybe she thought she was going somewhere important, meeting someone, proving something, or chasing an idea only she understood. But even that theory had gaps, because there was no evidence of a plan. No note, no conversation, no indication she had told anyone, or that anyone had told her to go anywhere. Which brings us to the second possibility, that someone else was involved, not necessarily inside the home, but outside of it, waiting, watching, or perhaps communicating in ways no one noticed. The abduction theory has always lingered, quietly, uncomfortably, because while there were no signs of forced entry, that doesn't eliminate the possibility of manipulation, or trust, or deception. What if Asha left willingly, but not independently? What if she believed she was meeting someone who had convinced her to leave before dawn, someone who told her exactly what to pack, what time to go, where to walk? It would explain the preparation, the direction, even the sightings along the highway. But it also raises a darker question. Who could have reached her? Asha's life was tightly controlled. No internet, limited exposure to strangers. Her interactions were mostly confined to family, school, and church. So if someone influenced her, they were likely already within her world. Not a random stranger, but someone familiar, trusted, invisible in plain sight. And yet, there's never been proof. No confirmed communication. No identified individual. No direct link. Just the possibility. Of course, as with many cases, suspicion eventually turned inward, toward the family, specifically her father. The reasoning, circumstantial. He was the last known person to see her. He had been awake late into the night. He left the house briefly. He was present during the critical window of time. But beyond those surface-level observations, there was nothing. No evidence. No inconsistencies. No signs of involvement. He cooperated fully with investigators, passed polygraph tests, and remained actively involved in the search for his daughter for years, spending time, money, energy, holding on to hope. And while theories may circulate, authorities ruled him out early on. So if not the family, then who? Some turned their attention to known criminals, specifically individuals with histories of violent behavior. One name that surfaced was a man responsible for multiple murders across North Carolina. A predator, a repeat offender, someone capable of unimaginable acts. And while the timeline somewhat overlapped, the details didn't. His known victims didn't match Asha's profile. His methods didn't align. And perhaps most importantly, there was no direct connection. No evidence tying him to her disappearance, which placed him in the same category as many others. A possibility, but not a solution. And then there's a much broader, more unsettling reality. One that doesn't focus on a single suspect, but on a pattern. Cases involving missing black children, especially young girls, have historically received less attention, less coverage, less urgency, and often less resolution, which makes it difficult to identify patterns, to connect cases, to build a database of similar crimes, because the data simply isn't there. Or worse, was never fully pursued. So the question lingers. Was Asha's disappearance an isolated incident, or part of something larger? that was never recognized. Years passed, then more years, and still no answers. Until October 2018, nearly 2 decades after Asha vanished, investigators released something new, something unexpected. A video, a public plea, not for general information, but for very specific items. 2 objects, 2 clues, presented without context, without explanation, but with urgency. The first, a children's library book, McElligot's Pool by Dr. Seuss. The second, a concert t-shirt from the group New Kids on the Block. At first it seemed random, disconnected, but investigators made one thing clear. These items mattered. They were relevant, and someone somewhere recognized them. The problem: no one knew how they were connected. Were they inside Asha's backpack? Were they items she owned? Or items someone else had? Were they found together? Or separately? The ambiguity was intentional. Because sometimes revealing less brings out more. Investigators believed these items could trigger a memory, a detail, a connection that had been overlooked for years. Maybe someone remembered a child with that book, or someone wearing that shirt, at the wrong time, in the wrong place. And even now, those 2 objects remain among the most important pieces of the case. So what do we believe happened? At its core, the evidence suggests one thing. Asha left her house on her own, but not without reason. Something made her pack. Something made her step outside. Something made her walk into the darkness. From there, the path becomes uncertain. She was seen on the highway. She entered the woods. She stopped at the storage structure. She left behind traces. But eventually, she crossed paths with something or someone. That ended her journey. And from that moment on, the trail disappears. Whether she was taken, helped, harmed, or hidden remains unknown. But one thing hasn't changed. Her family still believes she's out there, still alive, still waiting to be found. And that belief has never faded. So now, this is where you come in. If you've watched this far, if this story has stayed with you, take a moment, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, share this story. Because cases like this are solved when the right person hears the right detail. At the right time, someone out there knows something. Even if it feels small, even if it feels unimportant. That one detail could change everything. Because for over 2 decades, a family has been waiting. Waiting for answers. Waiting for closure. Waiting for the return of a little girl who stepped into the night and never came back. Asha Degree. Gone, but not forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, not beyond reach.